Hello, my name is Zoe Sadokierski. I'm a senior lecturer in visual communication at UTS's School of Design. I'm speaking today from the unceded ancestral lands of the Wongal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to Wongal elders past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for these lands. I'm recording this from Sydney, 4 weeks into a lockdown with no end in sight due to an outbreak of COVID-19. We're under stay-at-home orders again to prevent the spread of invisible particles that move from one body to another through the air. In late 2019, mere months before our first COVID lockdown, I was also under house arrest in Sydney. At that time, the harmful particles were visible. This is my child in the park across the road from our house at 3 p.m. on a spring afternoon. We don't live anywhere near the wildfires that spewed this particle-filled smoke. It was much worse for thousands of displaced people, not to mention the 30-something humans and an estimated billion animals who died. Nevertheless, the smoke caused a respiratory infection so severe I couldn't lie down for 3 days, and even speaking was painful. How can we feel empowered to participate in drastic change, to transition to better ways of living with and within the natural world, when the uncanniness of our current weather systems make our very homes feel alien? When a pandemic grinds the world to a halt, and rather than seeing it as a disorienting dilemma that could lead to significant transformative change, most public discourse is about who's to blame and returning to normal as quickly as possible. I frequently experience grief, hopelessness, despair, and am occasionally overwhelmed by guilt and shame that I cannot do more to make my son safe now and into the future. Yet I am incredibly privileged. I am relatively financially secure. I have a home and a family. I am well educated and have access to all I need to both survive and thrive. So although we do need to make space for grief and anger, or else we risk slipping into denial and unaccountability, we also each need to do what we can with the skills and opportunities we have. What does that mean for designers and design academics? The provocation for this seminar is how can we embrace practices and deliver strategies that better engage with global challenges characterised by their radical uncertainty. In the past few years, I've pivoted my research towards exploring ways to communicate the complexity and nuance of the ecological crises we're living through, asking questions such as, how might I use my expertise as a visual communicator to critique and expose the rhetorical power of information visualizations, particularly the kinds of charts and graphs used to communicate complex issues like climate science and nuclear power? How might blending fact and fiction communicate ambiguity and nuance around complex issues such as the ethics of bioengineering? Who might I collaborate with in order to communicate the social, ethical, and cultural dimension of climate change and biodiversity loss, to engage non-scientists in strategies for action and adaptation, in particular narratives that reach beyond academia? Yes, these are lofty and perhaps naively ambitious research questions, but aiming high gives me hope and purpose. I've just shown slides of some of the current research projects through which I'm thinking through these questions. Here, I'm just going to talk through a small part of one collaboration. Precarious Birds is a collaboration with my longtime friend and colleague, Timo Räsänen, which we started in 2018 when Timo was based in Parsons in New York and I was in Sydney. It's a conversation through making. We started sending each other through the post artworks about critically endangered and extinct birds once a month. Some of what I'm presenting here comes from a forthcoming paper we've written for the journal Tracy. In this project, Timo and I use creative practice to process our grief and anger in response to what is called the sixth mass extinction, one bird at a time. Within the project, birds are an index, markers that point to the ecological, cultural, and ethical dimensions of the extinction crisis more broadly. The project involves thinking through deliberately slow processes of drawing, cross-stitch, collage, and writing, as well as contextualizing this creative practice with shared texts and conversations with each other, as well as ecologists, historians, artists, and nature writers. Our creative practice provides an opportunity for us, and hopefully audiences of the work, to better understand the entangled significance of individual species within the extinction crisis. In focusing on one bird species at a time, we create manageable opportunities to process the overwhelming and almost inconceivably large phenomenon of the sixth extinction. Timo and I framed the collaboration as an expanded conversation about avian extinction, a conversation which is played out between humans, non-humans, texts, and material processes. One of our significant recent insights is about the deliberate slowness of our creative practice. In particular, repetitive drawing for me and cross-stitch for Timo. Engaging in deliberately slow creative practices is a way for us to stay with the trouble of avian extinction. Each of Timo's cross-stitch poems holds hundreds of hours of his labor. My drawings are faster, but more numerous. I'm going to spend a moment with one of my birds. This is Martha. She was the last passenger pigeon. She died in 1914 in Cincinnati Zoo. A generation before Martha's death, passenger pigeons were so numerous they blackened the sky for days at a time, migrating over North America. Human hunting wiped this innumerable species from Earth forever. Since 2019, I have drawn Martha more than 90 times from those two archival photographs. It matters that I draw from photographs of Martha, not just any passenger pigeon. She's the endling, the last of her species. It's her story I want to preserve. This is an overview map capturing some of my research orbits around Martha and her kin. There are cultural references. Martha became a poster bird for extinction in 2014, the centenary of her death. There are ethical angles to work through. The Great Passenger Pigeon Comeback Project aims to use DNA to de-extinct the species by 2025. It's worth noting that when I say human hunting caused the extinction of this species, this was largely for sport because the birds were considered pests in urban areas. Even if it were possible to bring the passenger pigeon back, let's think about how pigeons are treated in our cities now. There are also notes about material experiments I'm in the process of developing and working through. And here are overview maps for some of the other birds I'm bearing witness to in the project to give a sense of the complexity we're embracing through this collaboration. The last thing I'll show is a work that merges this collaboration with Timo and two other collaborations, Spec Studio and the Urban Field Naturalist Project. When Timo relocated to Sydney in 2020, we decided to include a local critically endangered bird in our study and chose the Regent honeyeater. These images are of a visual essay we had published about visiting the Regent honeyeaters at Sydney's Taronga Zoo. They have a captive breeding program there. We've been visiting them once a month, pandemic permitting, throughout the year. Sometimes we interview the behavioural ecologists or bird handlers. Sometimes we take field notes. And when we're exhausted, we just sit with them. Dedicating time to do this may not look like research to everyone, but practicing arts of noticing, Anna Singh, and staying with the trouble, Donna Haraway, is a kind of radical act when academia is increasingly whip-cracking about publishing reportable output quickly. So at the same time Timo and I were artfully noticing regent honeyeaters, I was collaborating with another design scholar friend, Andrew Burrell, who's also based at UTS, alongside 2 research scientists and a philosopher on the Urban Field Naturalist project. That project aims to get people who live in cities to engage with local biodiversity through storytelling. The project includes an online platform to share stories about nature observations in backyards, on balconies, and in local parks. This proves popular during times of lockdown, as well as producing resources to help people turn observations about nature into compelling short stories. Andrew and I curated an exhibition at the UTS Library as a way to introduce our university community to the project. One original work we collaborated on is an augmented bird box. The artwork depicts key threats to the regent honeyeater species. The birds rely on corridors of eucalyptus trees to nest and breed. However, land clearing and degradation as a result of agriculture and infrastructure projects has reduced and fragmented this essential habitat to 3 disconnected patches. This is a problem because fledglings are left to fend for themselves and young males learn mating calls from adult males, unless of course there are none around to hear. Without their unique song, mating pairs cannot find each other. Exceptionally cute sugar glider possums raid nests for eggs, further jeopardizing the survival of the species. Viewers are invited to look through the layers of illustrations in the box, but also to use a QR code to activate an augmented reality encounter. From the front of the box, an audio essay written and narrated by Tom Van Doren is activated, describing his personal discovery of the regent honeyeater near his home in the Blue Mountains just before the wildfires of 2019 I mentioned at the start of this talk. Before the fires, the numbers of birds left in the wild was estimated optimistically to be around 400 and pessimistically 150. That's not many birds spread across a continent the size of Australia. Since the fires which ripped through some of the last known habitat, there has not been an accurate count of birds in the wild. From the back of the box, audio of Timo and I discussing our monthly visits to the captive honeyeaters at Taronga, about what we're learning about the breeding and release programs there, and also other research into the birds. I created each image in the box by drawing from contemporary photographs of the birds and trees and possums, then colouring those drawings with digital collage from archival natural history illustrations. This produces an uncanny image. It looks like a familiar natural history illustration from a distance, but when you get closer, you realise something's off. The aim of this technique is to draw attention to the fact that all representations of nature are fictions, and to make us think about who is in charge of telling the story and bearing the memories of these and other creatures. So coming back to the bigger Precarious Birds project, Timo and I reflect that the extinction crisis is not limited to scientists. The losses of this crisis belong to all of us who remain human and non-human. In this project, we claim our share of the loss by making ourselves visible through written, drawn, and stitched traces in the work and in the way we present it as an expanded conversation. Through our creative practice, we say this is our business, because in recognizing the interdependencies of Earth systems, it becomes impossible to remain uninvolved. Doing something becomes an imperative. Thank you.